Hello friends, this is Christopher Davis-Shannon, and today I would like to preach to you about the gospel of the metronome. Now, you've been playing music for a bit, so you've likely been told numerous times that you need to practice with a metronome. And that's generally where the discussion ends. What are you supposed to do with the metronome? How do you play with a metronome? So that's what we're going to break down in this video. We're going to start off with just how to use a metronome, and then we're going to go through 3 separate practice techniques that you probably haven't used before, because a metronome is not just a timekeeping device. Now, for the uninitiated amongst us, a metronome is a device, be it analog or electronic, that keeps steady time. Humans do not have perfect time. As much as we like to pretend that we do not. We generally have a tendency to rush. That's not a good thing in music. While we don't want it to be robotic, we do want it to be consistent and know where the beat is. If you don't have a metronome, that's okay. If you have a computer, you can just go to Google, type in the word metronome, and there's one built into the search engine. From there, I highly recommend, if you have a mobile device, iOS or Android, there's an app by a company called Soundbrenner. It's their metronome. It's absolutely free. They sell devices that you can connect to it. You don't need them. The metronome is great, though. It allows you to really change the different accented beats, all these different meters in here. It's a very, very flexible device. And did I mention, it's free. They're not paying me for this. I just happen to actually use this metronome every single day of my life. So if you've never played with a metronome before, or even if you have, if you're a beginner and you started playing with a metronome, it probably felt very unnatural at first, and that's normal. Playing with a metronome is a skill in and of itself, just like playing an instrument. And you need to keep that in mind. It's okay to get frustrated, but I'm going to give you a little practice routine to get you used to playing with a metronome. The first step to that is putting your uke in its case. When we're talking about rhythmic concepts, we're talking about music. When we play it on the instrument, strumming is how we apply rhythm. But that's adding technique into the equation. We want to make this as easy as possible. We want to think just about the rhythm for a moment. So if we turn on our metronome, I highly recommend just starting on 60 beats per minute. That is 1 second. So it's a length of time we're actually very familiar with. It's nice and slow, so we have time to think. The first exercise you need to do is just playing with the pulse, or where all the beats are. What we can do is just clap along with the metronome. So here's your exercise. It's going to sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's it. Do that for 1 minute per day for the next week before you move on to the next exercise. We want to internalize that pulse. And you'll find that if you do this every single day, it's not that hard. But it takes time to internalize that and get your brain to tell your hands to do the right thing at the right time, along with what you're hearing. It's a new skill, and it's going to take a little bit of time to develop, but you're not going to lose it once you have it. Now, the next step is that we need to start subdividing the beats, or breaking them into smaller chunks. We don't always just go right with the pulse, right? There are rhythms that fall in between that. So first thing we need to do is look at eighth notes, or an exact half subdivision of the beat, and clap the same exact thing. So what we can do is put our metronome on the same tempo, but now we're going to alternate bars of quarter notes and then eighth notes, which will be exactly half of those pulses. So it'll be 8 total claps per measure. And we want to be able to cycle between the two of those, because we always want to be feeling that downbeat pulse, but thinking about the subdivision in the back of our head. So this exercise will sound a little bit something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and we'll stop there. And obviously you can break this down into further increments. We can go to 16th notes and triplets and practice all different rhythms. We can mix up the quarter notes and the eighth notes. But for this, just start getting used to the basic pulse and this first basic subdivision, and then we can start applying it to the uke and practicing basic strumming techniques and rhythms along with the metronome. First, let's talk about probably the most common usage for a metronome in the practice room, which is just building up speed and also accuracy within that as well. If we're having trouble with any piece of music. We want to find a metronome marking that we can play it at perfectly. And that might be really darn slow. Because we've already done the math of thinking about the technique side of things. We've already worked out the rhythms, how they feel, and now we just have to get everything linked up. The key is always to start nice and slow. So if I'm doing something like beginning of La Vie en Rose here, we can practice this very slowly with the metronome, and that's going to really let any of the flaws that we have in our playing become very apparent to us. 2, 3, 4. That was good. I played it correctly that time. So if I was working on this piece, the next thing that I would do is I would give myself maybe 3 beats per minute on the metronome. A small increment. Small enough that our brain doesn't really think, hey, we're going faster here. You want to trick yourself in this and practice it up to speed. So we put it on just a little bit faster and do the same thing. And you can keep going like this, and you'll always find that there's a plateau each day, the fastest that you can get in the piece that you're working on. That's okay. At that point, put it away. Don't fight it, because you're at that level where the technique is just not there to make it fast enough. But tomorrow, you're going to make it faster. Repetition across days is key, and we want to keep, with the metronome as well, just pushing that speed up. The second thing I want to address with the metronome and speed is that one of the other great things that we can do with this is slow things down. Really fast pieces, we tend to just try to barrel through, and usually with the metronome we start too fast. But if we take something and we bring it to the slowest tempo that we absolutely can, that's going to expose all of the flaws we have in there and also make us really think about the time. So I want to challenge you to take a piece that you've been working on that's a more up-tempo piece and cut that speed in half. And each time that you get it right, bring it down 2 beats per minute, slower and slower and slower until you can't play it anymore. And when you get to that point, then put your metronome at your normal tempo that you play it at. And notice how much more clean the piece is now because you forced yourself with the metronome. We're not just thinking about being slower, we know that we are in fact being honestly slow and methodical about the work that we're putting in on the instrument. The second thing that we can do in the practice room with a metronome, we don't just need to use it to build speed or to even beat on every single beat. We can practice groove with this, but to do that you have to understand where the accented beats are in whatever rhythm or whatever pattern that you're playing. So if we're playing a waltz, we would set our metronome just on beat 1 because 2 and 3 are on accent. So we would hear 1, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and practice it as if it's a simple meter like that. Let's talk about, say, swing music. Swing music has a reverse of what our usual accent is. It's accented on 2 and 4 as opposed to 1 and 3. If you think about rock music, you have a kick drum hitting on 1, and then 3 is usually the snare drum, something similar to that at least. So if we're practicing swing music and we want to internalize those accents, we can set our metronome on just 2 and 4. And what's going to happen with that is our brain is going to start to remember each and every time that those beats are important. Not that we need to, hit them really hard, but that they're just a little bit more nuanced and we need to think about them more. We'll internalize that groove better. So on a metronome, you can set it to half the speed, which would be every other beat, right? Or if you're using this metronome app, the Soundburner one that I use, you can do it so beats 1 and 3 are unaccented. They're just very light, and then 2 and 4 are nice and loud. You can play along with that. It sounds like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. You practice like that, and then when you're feeling really comfortable with it, then you take the 1 and 3 accents away and just make it 2 and 4, so that all you're hearing are the accented beats in the music as opposed to all of the downbeats. It'll sound like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. And And that's just going to help you feel the groove better because your brain is forced to fill in those blanks as opposed to just doing everything entirely by what you think should be happening. We have something telling us what that groove is. So one last thing we can do in the practice room is really help to internalize our own sense of time. As I said in the beginning of this video, we don't want to become reliant on the metronome, but it can help to really give us a good perspective on what good time sounds like. And what we can do is start dropping beats while we're doing it. I have this programmed now that it's going to do 4 beats for the first measure, just beats 1 and 3 in the second measure, and then for the last 2 measures, it's only going to do beat 1. And we have to fill in the blank with our head, which forces us to make these subdivisions even as possible. So let's see if I can clap just quarter notes along with this whole thing. Let's listen one time through to what the rhythm sounds like. So it's going to be 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So we'll try our best to line up with that, and you'll be surprised. It's much harder than you think it is. But you can program tracks in here where you end up going, down to even 4 measures of rest. You want to keep widening that time of where the click is. So start off with them close together and then just start, cutting the time in half and trying to keep with that metronome. If you practice this every single day, your entire sense of time is going to be much more fluid when you're on the actual bandstand. Now, just one other note before we get going. I love practicing with metronomes. I don't think that you should do it all the time, but you should do it a little bit every day. But another important thing in the practice room for keeping time and groove and all of this is just practicing along with recordings. If you're playing the music I play, there's nothing like just grooving along with Fats Waller's band and feeling the natural ebb and flow of the rhythm. Because that's the thing, when you're playing with real musicians, they're not robots. Well, I guess today some of them are. But for the most part, we're playing with real people. And real time flows, and it's okay. Songs can speed up. Songs can slow down. That's all natural. But we want the overall time to be consistent, and doing these exercises with the metronome is going to help you a lot with this. I'll see y'all next week.